Welcome to the Women Matter podcast with your host, Marline C. DeRosso. Join us as we delve into all things women, from the complexities of fertility to empowering discussions on femininity and confidence. Our segments shine a light on the journey of family building, offering awareness and support to those navigating this path. We're here to tackle impactful topics crucial to women's lives, empowering you to be unapologetically yourself while embracing your femininity. Tune in for insightful conversations and inspiration to live boldly in every aspect of your life. Because here on the Women Matter podcast, every woman's story matters. Hello, and thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Women Matter podcast. I am your host, Marline C. DeRosso. I'm so excited to be here today. I'd like to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, infertility. As a 15-year infertility survivor, I think it's important that we continue to share the stories of the infertility community in hopes of shedding light and awareness and bringing support to those that are affected by this horrible infertility phenomenon. This episode, I am titling it Life on the Other Side of Infertility. What does life look like after you've gone through infertility? Now, that is a very loaded question because life may look completely different for each person or couple that has had an infertility experience. And that's why I wanted to kind of record this episode, because oftentimes we talk about going through infertility. My apologies. We talk about going through infertility and no one really knows what happens after, right? Whether or not the person found success, whether or not they were able to not conceive, what they did after. For those that were able to conceive, how does life look with that baby that, came as a result of infertility treatment? There's just a lot to unpack there. So definitely stay tuned as we dive into this topic of how life on the other side of infertility. So I wanted to start off by picking up kind of where I left off on the last episode of the Women Matter podcast, where I talked about what I wished I knew about IVF, when I was going through it. And overall, the infertility journey as a whole, I said that I wish that I knew that, the possibility does exist that you may have a miscarriage or lose your child after you find success, with infertility or infertility treatments. And that's the first thing that I want to talk about on my little list here for life on the other side of infertility is the miscarriage aspect. And miscarriage is something that in itself is not really talked about. It itself also comes with a lot of shame and a lot of taboo surrounding it. A lot of women feel alone. They feel like it's their fault. They blame themselves if they suffer a miscarriage. So it's something that not a lot of people talk about. And unfortunately, after my husband and I found success with our first IVF, which oftentimes doesn't happen because the statistics although a lot of people do IVF, it's not an automatic, success if you try it. So we were very, very lucky to have found success with our first IVF cycle, but unfortunately it resulted in the loss of our daughter. Her name was Angel Grace. And it was just a very traumatic experience in the sense that you think that you're struggling for so long, you're willing to do anything. We did any and everything, you guys. Like, I probably have to make another video of everything we did, infertility related and not, to try to conceive, children. And it was a very, very harrowing experience just to be one of the lucky ones to find success with IVF and then have it literally ripped away from you in just such a traumatic fashion. So life on the other side of infertility for some people involves miscarriage. It involves child loss. We lost our daughter when I was 22 weeks and 1 day, and I delivered her, had a vaginal delivery in the hospital. I was already on bed rest for almost a month while I was there. trying to see if we can save the pregnancy. I ended up in the hospital as a result of incompetent cervix. It has now been renamed to cervical insufficiency. And what that means is that my cervix, which is the base and opening of the uterus towards the bottom, was not strong enough to hold the baby, and it caused a painless dilation where the cervix dilates, opens painlessly, and literally you could be walking and the baby falls out. So that's something that, again, no one really talks to you about or prepares you for on this infertility journey. So because it was my first pregnancy, I had to then navigate life after this loss, not knowing, what our next steps were, what we were going to do, if we would try again. I was afraid to try again because as much as I wanted it, I was afraid that I'd end up in another loss situation. Wasn't sure if it would even work. And when you're doing this stuff, there's money. My last episode talked about the financial burden involved with IVF as well. So there's just a lot of moving parts and a lot to consider when it comes to even trying for IVF, let alone after a loss. So it was a very, very tricky time for us. After that loss, life after infertility for us involved me seeking therapy. I wasn't sure if I was coming or going. I literally felt like I was living in a world where I was having an outer body experience. I was not Marlene. I don't know who I was. And it didn't help that I started to find out so many other people, including people that we knew or people in our family, had suffered miscarriages, and no one talked about it. Outside of it happening to me, I really didn't know a lot of people that happened to. And then, everybody miscarries for different reasons too, right? Which is why I think it's important that the infertility community, educates the infertility patients about that possibility so that, yes, I was able to beat infertility and get pregnant, but then my physical specimen of my body, which is my cervix, had its own deficiencies, causing me then not to be able to successfully carry that pregnancy to term. And for some people, it might be something else. It might be high blood pressure. It might be diabetes. It might be, placenta issues. Like you just never know. It's just a myriad of problems. So the first thing that I experienced in terms of life on the other side of infertility was a horrible childbirth and miscarriage, which ended up in the loss of our daughter. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about on the other side, life on the other side of infertility, is parenthood and what that looks like. After we lost our daughter, we decided to try again. It took several months to make that decision. And when we ultimately decided to try again, after much prayer, me journaling, my therapist, acupuncture, yoga, walking outside for fresh air, like it took a lot. So several months later, I finally mustered up the courage to say, okay, we're ready to try again. And lucky for us, on our second IVF, we were able to conceive, and we got pregnant with twin boys. So remember, I told you getting pregnant is half the journey. Now I'm plagued with, at that time, the thought of, what if I lose these babies? What if my body fails me again? What the heck am I going to do? So I was scared. I was so afraid. Life after infertility for me was scary, 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 scary. And it's gonna get scarier. Okay. Just keep listening. But we're good now. Don't worry. It's fine. Not to scare anyone, but it was very, very scary. And I use the word scary because at that point I was I was on uncharted territory. I had never experienced that before. And now I'm finally pregnant. So I'm having, two firsts, meaning my first one was, okay, I'm finally pregnant, and never, finally get to experience that closer to full term, although I didn't get to full term, but that was what it was in my head. I needed to think positive, thinking I would get there. And now instead of being pregnant with one, I'm pregnant with two, right? So that was a new thing on its own. And then the second thing was, how do I stay pregnant? Like what? I don't even know what to do with myself. I was just a wreck. Like I could be walking just like I had painless dilation with my first pregnancy. Could that be happening with the second pregnancy? So it was a very scary thought. And lucky for us, we went with a high risk OBGYN, and we had some care plans in place, which included doing a preventative cerclage. The cerclage is a stitch that they use to sew your cervix shut, just to kind of reinforce the bottom of the uterus so that it doesn't open up. So we did that with the twins, and then I was able to, go on my life. At least that's what I thought, right? But of course, I didn't know that cerclages may not work either. So you see, again, something else that I did not know. No one told me. So at that point, I got the cerclage, and I'm carrying on about my business. I was very careful. I just went to work, came home, didn't do anything, extraordinary, rigorous, anything. And I ended up in the hospital again with the twins because, again, my cervix had dilated um, to I want to say 1 to 2 centimeters, about 1 to 2 centimeters with the cerclage in, by the way. Okay, so that part was very, very scary. So at that point, life after infertility for me was navigating how to stay pregnant and how to actually beat infertility. Because to me, if I was able to actually successfully deliver the babies, then to me that means I would have beat infertility. So the first part of life after infertility for me was that trying to stay pregnant and quote unquote beat infertility, because after I thought I beat infertility before, we didn't, and we ended up losing our child. So fast forward, the twins were born 26 weeks, 1 day, and they had a 3-day shy stay in the NICU of 4 months. So they were in the NICU almost 4 months, and they're perfect. I, I feel like crying just for even saying that. I just thank God every day. I don't know. There is no other word for it. I didn't expect to get emotional, but they're perfect. And at that point, we were navigating life after infertility as parents to very micro preemies. And that's something else I didn't know, that I knew I heard of premature babies before, but I didn't know that there was such thing as a micro preemie. And that's what my boys were. One of them was 1 pound, 15 ounces. The other one was 1 pound and 11 ounces. And because of the extra little, I guess, grams that are behind them, they rounded them up. So the 1 pound, 15 ounce baby Kason was deemed 2 pounds because it was a few millimeters of an ounce or something left to get it to 2 pounds, to get him to 2 pounds. And then the baby that was 1 pound, 11 ounces was, I guess, moved up to 1 pound, 12 ounces. That was Camden. So of course I was not prepared for that. My husband was not either. Okay. So now you've gone from dealing with infertility all these years, dealing with the child loss, dealing with another bed rest, then having NICUs, then having a 4 month NICU stay. And now we are trying to figure out how to take care of these children that are in the NICU. And in the meantime, guys, life is continuing. I have a job. Like I'm moving up in my career. I'm, being promoted left, right, and indifferent, which is obviously a great thing. But I had to try to navigate meeting all my deadlines, proving I can do my work in spite of what I was going through. Just very, very challenging times, back and forth to the office, and to have the children, but not really experience being a mother also took a mental toll on me. So I was still with my therapist at that time as well, because it was just really, really tough. And while I was at work, I went back to work 2 weeks after my C-section. I delivered them via C-section because we had an utmost, horrible deadline, strong. Can't even think of the word. It was and it was a very important deadline that needed to be met. That if it wasn't, it would result in great financial stress for the company in terms of fines and things of that nature. So 2 weeks later, I went back to work with my C-section, and while I was there, I traveled with my pump. So I was pumping milk for the babies, and my routine consisted of waking up in the morning. This is life after infertility, okay? Life on the other side of infertility. I woke up and I would pump, have breakfast, and my mother-in-law would have breakfast waiting for me, and depending on what I wanted to eat. And then after I did that, I got myself ready kind of sort of for work, and then I left. I got to work around 10:30. By then it was already time to pump again. So as soon as I got to work, I kind of changed and went into a room and pumped. And then I worked maybe from like 11 until about 3. And then it was time for me to pump again. So I would pump like at 3 and then leave 3:30, clean up all my supplies, everything, leave 3:30, head back to the house. And label the milk, do everything I needed to do. And when I went back to the house, grandma had lunch or something ready already because at that point I needed to eat. Although I didn't feel like eating, I was very depressed. I was very just non-motivated. Yeah. So I ate something, and then depending on the size of the boys at the time, because of course they went through different stages, they were able to wear clothes. So we were very meticulous about washing their clothes and everything. So when I went home from work to drop off all that stuff I had with me, my bags and the pump and all of this stuff, which what was good is that the hospital gave us a very medical grade pump, which was fantastic. Then I would pick up any clean clothes or new clothes and covers for the boys. And I was at the NICU. So I was at the NICU from 4 until about 2 in the morning, 1 in the morning, just any given random time. I didn't want to leave them. I didn't want to leave them. So that was my routine for a long time. Okay. And then once the boys came home, now it's like, okay, you want them home, you want them home. And now they're home. It's like, okay, so what do I do with them? What do I do with them? So that was a little tricky too, because we had to establish a routine so that we can get them under control in the sense of like making sure they had what they needed, making sure we gave them ample touch time. And we tried to keep the same routine as the NICU because that was what they were used to for the past 4 months. So I was able to take a leave. At that point, I was home with them for about 2 months, being on leave with them. And it was just such a wonderful time. And it was very, very hard, very tough, no sleep, tired, all of that, but I had to snap out of it one day and just kind of took the experience for what it is. I told myself these babies won't be small forever, so I need to enjoy giving them the shower, enjoy, doing the bottles, finish with one immediately. I have to go do touch time for the other one. And then by the time we finish him, the first one is on his cycle to get back up again. So in between doing, care for the babies, there was like no downtime, maybe 30 minutes, right? In between that 3 hour span. So life after, the other side of infertility with the twin babies home from the NICU was very, very tricky. And we were very leery of people coming over. We didn't want them to get sick. And it was a lot. It was a lot. And all of this, they had lots of doctor's appointments. So for me, life was very busy in terms of getting up in the morning. They had different therapy appointments. So they had the therapist, they had the cardiologist, they had the pulmonologist, they had the eye doctor, which is the ophthalmologist, they had physical therapy. They just had all kind of specialty appointments. And it got to the point where I had to change my schedule at work because I tried to arrange where things would happen mainly on one day. So Wednesday seemed to be that day that they had more stuff going on from like early morning to mid-afternoon. So I just didn't go to work that Wednesday. And if it ended up being a light day, I would work from the house. So I was able to arrange that. And I remember sometimes on those Wednesdays too, I would try to get on the treadmill. Because of course during this time, I'm a mom of two with twins. So of course I've gained weight and I'm trying to be healthy. And so I would walk on the treadmill while they're asleep or something. But I don't know if they just smelled me or what. But the minute I went back there, they were up. So that went out the window too. Um, so we talked about the NICU, just making sure, we were there every single day. Every day we were there. Like, and you have to have that presence there. And then you just thank God and just feel very blessed and grateful because so many of the kids, unfortunately, that were there with the boys, they either passed away, they had to have surgery. Like it was very tough, it was tough, but it's good. And then I wanted to touch on the breastfeeding. From the time I delivered, I started to produce milk at whatever time. I don't remember how long after, but then, like I said, they gave us the breast pump. So I was really meticulous on making sure I got as much milk out as I can. And between my mom and my two mom-in-laws, which is my husband's mom and my husband's dad's wife, I had the three of them helping me in terms of like nourishing my body to have food so I can produce the milk and having certain natural fruits like papayas and juices and things with like milk and things to just kind of make it robust so that the milk would keep coming and be, nourishing for the boys. And even the hospital, the NICU nurses stressed it, like they don't push breastfeeding on you if it's not something you want, but if it's something that they know you are okay with, they really help promote it too, because those nutrients are really good for the babies, especially with them being that small. And I remember being a little bit depressed when by the time they came a little bit right around the time they came home from the MICU, my milk just dried up. There was no more, and I cried for about a week, because I was so depressed. I'm like, I mean, I couldn't hold them in long. Now I can't even give them milk. Like, I just felt like such a failure. It was just a very, very difficult time. But, my family reminded me, listen, you pumped out all that milk for like 6 months. So, that's a lot. And it was two babies. So in essence, that's like a year, right? And then NICU, I mean, I needed a lot of milk. Like, these kids were eating every 3 hours and all they had was breast milk. So once I kind of looked at it that way, when they told me that, I'm like, oh, okay. So then I felt better and was able to stop crying. Okay, so that's that. I wanted to make sure I touched on the breastfeeding. The next thing here that on my list that I wanted to talk about on life on the other side of infertility is the relationship dynamics. Your relationship really changes. And I don't think it necessarily changes because of the children. I think it changes in our case because of our outlook on how life was supposed to be versus how life actually looked when we finally had the children. So my husband and I went through a very, very tricky time. One of the things I can say is that when I look back on it, I had to put myself back in therapy because I started to realize I think the problem was me. And that's okay because I'm becoming more and more self-aware. I wasn't as self-aware back then, but I've always had the spirit of discernment, and I like to kind of take a step back, reflect, and kind of see what's going on. And I had to give myself a little grace because I know, although I wasn't able to explain it then, when I look back at it now, that was like the onset of my postpartum. So everything was a problem and everybody was wrong except me, and the world was going to end. Like that's what was happening. Okay. So my husband was very quiet, and I took that as, either he didn't care or he wasn't understanding or what have you. But when we finally once I became a little bit self-aware and realized, it's like all of a sudden one day I woke up and it clicked. I'm like, I think I'm going overboard. Like, I think my expectations and what I'm asking for is like unrealistic. And at one point I realized that that's what I was thinking and how I was, but then I shut it out and said, I don't care. I just had these kids. People do need to do what I say, and they do need to know what I want without me telling them what I want. Like, what kind of mess is that? Like, who thinks like that? So although I had acknowledged that initially, when I realized it, I was like, oh no, I don't care. They still need to do it, fix it, right? And then I had to kind of take a step back and realize, oh yeah, no, Marlene, it doesn't really work that way, ma'am, right? So we were able to find our way back into therapy, and it's in therapy my husband was finally able to talk, because he said all that time, because we ended up going to therapy maybe a year or so after the boys came home from the NICU. It was rough, and it was at that time and I was afraid in the sense that, like, what was he going to say, because he hadn't really been saying anything. Like, if I'm upset, he just lets me vent. He never yelled, and he's like that as a person, period. But he never yelled. He never called me a name. He never. I was just fussing and he's just listening. The one time I said something to him and I saw him get expressively emotional was when I told him I felt like I was alone. And I think finally in therapy, he really told me how that made him feel. But during that moment, when I told him that, he said, that's the worst thing for a guy to hear, that like, I'm here with you and you feel alone. What does that even mean? Like, he said that really crushed his spirit. But when we finally got to therapy and we talked about it, that's when he kind of expressed, and I was happy because I was afraid that he wasn't going to say anything because he doesn't really talk much. But basically, what I was thinking of me is what was actually happening when I finally became aware of what I was doing. And it was almost as though I wanted everything my way, and there was no room for error, no room for an adjustment. It was just, it had to be what it had to be. And let me tell you what I mean by that. My husband at the time worked overnight. So he would start work, let's say 5 p.m., and he's not coming home until 5, 6, sometimes even 7 in the morning if it's a busy season. So at that point, a logical person, anybody, would say, okay, well, you don't want that person that just worked a 12 to 14-hour shift overnight at that, driving you and two newborn itty bitty people to a hospital appointment 40 minutes away, in the express lane, like, they're tired. But at the time, I couldn't see that. I was just like, I had these kids and I'm the only one going to these specialist appointments. Like, I just felt very overwhelmed. And even if it was like on the weekend and it was time to go to the grocery store, that was our thing. My husband and I love the grocery store. Even till now, we'll go to Costco and then I'm like sneaking trying to record him because he loves to try to fuss at the people if they don't have enough samples or something like that. Like that's our thing from when we started dating. So I look forward to that, especially after I had the kids. Like, oh, okay, we can at least go to the grocery store together. That was like our time. And he would send me to go with his mother. And why? Because he's tired. He's worked 5 days, sometimes six, 14-hour days. So in his brain, oh, okay, well, my mother is here. She can help her, or she can call her mom or my friend. I didn't want that. I wanted him to go, because it just had to be like that. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? So the relationship dynamics really changed. And I am just really grateful that he was very patient with me. Um, and yeah, so that's something that we people who go through infertility, because sometimes I hear the stories and other people where they say they've had an infertility experience and they're either divorced or whatever. Like even me, out of all my years, I've been married. It's 22 years this year. Never thought of divorce during that postpartum time. Oh yeah, I wanted nothing to do with my husband. I was even telling my friends, yeah, I'm getting a divorce. Like I can't deal with him. Like you're just not rational. You're not thinking. So that's something to be very mindful of. The change and shift in each other's character and your interaction with the person because of infertility. So, but everything is perfect, thank God. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, right? I kind of brought it up a little bit in the previous video was the finances, right? At life on the other side of infertility, you now have these children if found success on your treatments, right? You're already navigating these relationship ups and downs, and now you have these hospital and loan bills, right? So, and in addition to this, I had premature babies which required a different kind of milk, which cost like $30 a can instead of the regular $18 a can. And there's two of them. Like it was, I mean, the financial diapers I didn't have to worry about. Thank God, and shout out to all my family and friends. When I tell you, for those twins, I didn't have to buy diapers for 1 year. Who does that? When I tell you they showed up and showed out for their twins, Kason and Camden, at the baby shower, and that's another thing. We had our baby shower when the boys were in the NICU. They were born in November. The plan was to have the baby shower in January because they were supposed to be born in I think February, November, December, January, February. They were supposed to be born at the end of February. So the baby shower was supposed to be scheduled for January or December or something like that. But then when I ended up hospitalized in November, we couldn't have the baby shower. So after the boys were born safe, they had a great prognosis, meaning, those 5 a.m. phone calls became routine and they're not telling you that your child is dying. Okay. All right. So then my family was like, okay, no, we can safely schedule the baby shower. So while they were in the NICU, January 5th, I'll never forget that. January 5th, 2013 was the date of their baby shower. And the family, I mean, showed up for them. These boys had everything. It was just beyond. Okay, I don't want to cry again. This will be my third time crying on this podcast. Okay, so the bills, right? So now I'm paying whatever the co-pays for any of these bills. Each bill for each twin was $1 million for the NICU. Okay, each $1 million each. And thank goodness we didn't have to cover that because we had insurance. And then the state of Florida at the time had some kind of rule or something that they're not going to not take care of kids because of money. So whatever our insurance didn't cover, they gave some kind of grant or Medicaid or something. I don't know, something like that, but they covered that. But all of the other information, because remember, we took out that loan I was telling you about, the multi-cycle loan. So we were paying the loan on these children. So we paid them off. We paid the kids off when they were about 6 or something or 5. So we always say now that we can't take them back, right? They have been paid off, but you're juggling paying back those loans. I had my own hospital bill. I wasn't in a NICU, so the government didn't cover anything for me. Okay. So I had to pay whatever my 20% and my surgeries and, my hospital stay, like all of that racked up. So you have to think about that, life on the other side of infertility, because if you're not financially set, and sometimes even if you are, it's just still a strain because the bill, when I tell you they keep just sending the bills in the mail, it just can get very, very overwhelming. So try to put a plan together as it relates to the finances, because in addition to that, you're buying formula, you're buying things that the babies need, they're growing out of their clothes, you're buying wipes, like it's a lot. Okay. Almost done with my list here. The next thing is life on the other side of infertility, there's a lot of if you have postpartum, because not everybody gets it, but if you have postpartum or you're just having the regular mommy blues, or obviously you're sleep deprived, you don't really have a life, you can't really go out, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It's like there's no real social escape, right? Trying to find date night with your partner can be really hard because you got to try to find people to watch the children. And then I say all of that to say that postpartum, that post delivery, there's a lot of guilt that comes with that, because even if you feel like you want to complain or say how you're feeling or express how you're feeling, you feel guilty, right? Because you're like, well, you wanted this, so why are you complaining about it? Embrace your sleepless nights, embrace your body aches, embrace your lack of, date night or human interaction, embrace your inability to put on some clothes and some makeup and just be drenched in baby, spit up and milk. And it was tough for us because both my boys had reflux really bad. And guys, when I tell you reflux, I mean projectile. And I remember crying when I was looking for resources to try to figure out how to help them. And the pediatricians were fantastic. We changed the formula, we added things, we just did a whole bunch of stuff. But I read one time, and I think I needed to read it because it actually helped me. But I read where just on the blogs, mommy blogs, different things, acid reflux or reflux for the children. And the lady said her son had it for 1 year. So once I read that, I let out a huge cry. I got it all out of my system, and then I just dealt with it. I think I needed to see that instead of, how you constantly go for a checkup to get something situated and you're like, okay, this treatment is going to work, and then it doesn't. That constant, try, fail, try, fail, try, fail cycle started to affect me. So I think as hard as it was to read about that lady saying that her kids basically dealt with it for a year, I think that's what I needed to see to be like, okay, let me come to terms with it. This is what it is. So what are we going to do? So we learned how to basically, position them, how to feed them, how to watch out for that little glimmer in their eye where you're like, okay, that's it, stop. Because if not, if he takes one more even whiff of it, he's going to projectile vomit. And then we got to know the kids really, really well. And we were able to deal with that. And then the whole projectileness of it kind of stopped maybe a year and a couple of months. They were born in November. So I think about that next December, January, because I think I remember going somewhere with them and we were worried that they were going to do the projectile thing, and then they didn't. Because then as a mom too, you worry because you're like, how is it that you just ate all of this, whatever amount of ounces or whatever they ate, and then all of it is out, like the kids. And then I cried over that too. Let me tell you, just life after, what's it? Life on the other side of infertility. A lot of crying. There's a lot of crying. I cried about that too because I'm like, they're already little. They already 3 months behind. They're developmentally delayed, and now they can't even eat and keep their food. And to me, the kids weren't getting anything because they were always throwing up. Like it was horrible. But my parents and my in-laws said, no, no, no. Believe it or not, it may seem like everything is coming up, but they're keeping something because, honey, those babies were chunky. Okay. So yeah. So the postpartum, the guilt part of it, just your post-pregnancy experience, you may feel a lot of guilt where you're dealing with that on the other side of infertility, just because you feel like you should be embracing it with no qualms because you asked for it. That's at least how us infertile people feel, which is far from the truth, right? So you just have to give yourself grace and kind of navigate that new journey and that new phase in your life because it is ever evolving. Okay. And finally, I kind of talked about it a little bit, but for me, what I remember a lot about the other side of infertility is juggling life as a working mom. It was tough. And I think that also kind of bled into the relationship dynamics too, because I had to realize that at the end of the day, the moms, we just do it, and as much as the dads want to be there, sometimes they can't be there, whatever the case may be. And it doesn't mean they don't care. It doesn't mean they don't love you or the children. It's just different. It's just different. And everybody's dynamic is different. And especially in our case, and I think that's why I was also in my head a little bit harder on my husband, because I told him that I wanted him to not work that shift once we started to navigate this infertility, like really taking it seriously to start IVF. And he listened, right? He was able to get the different shifts, change the schedule. Because in my brain, with him being home when I'm home, then we'll both be hands on with the kids. This is what I'm thinking in my head. So he was able to navigate that, got the request, but then everything went to heck in a handbasket, and they offered him significantly more money to go back and manage his shift. So that's when it kind of became like, man, I'm really like doing this to me, what I felt was on my own. And, I'm happy my husband was able to express how he felt in therapy, because one of the things he said is that he never said anything to me because he never wanted to say something and it come out wrong, or I take it wrong, because he's coming from a loving place, and he knows that where I wasn't ready to accept whatever he told me. So he just said nothing. Now, I don't know if that was smart, but I don't remember what the therapist told him about that. But he was saying, he felt like, I was being inconsiderate. And he also felt like, in a way, that we were both approached, we were looking at the same situation, but we both had a different lens on in examining the situation. So I looked at it as, yes, I have these people here, but they're not him. He's looking at it as, why does she need me when I have all these people here to help her? And he said to the therapist too that it was hard because at this time, a lot of my friends had children too. We all were new moms. And literally, my house was filled with people to help. Now, it doesn't mean that I had it easy. He's not saying that. And that's why he didn't say anything, because he didn't want me to think that he felt that I felt that I had it. It was the whole thing. So he just didn't say anything. But he was just saying a lot of people don't have the help, and you do. We, like, your mom doesn't drive, but I can go get her and she's there in a second, right? My husband's mom lived with us, so she's there. My husband's dad's wife lived 7 minutes away, literally. She's there. Every time she got off of work, she was at the house. And my problem was, as a new mom, you want to do everything. You want to do everything. You don't want people to help you, and you don't want to feel like you're a burden on people. So in his eyes, I have these people to help me. Why am I not taking advantage of it? And why am I blaming him and only want him to do it, when in essence they're kind of helping him too, because he needs to sleep, like he's working overnight. But I couldn't see it. I didn't want to see it. I didn't care to see it until I had to take a step back and kind of figure it out. So trying to juggle that, doing work and doing everything. At one point, we ended up getting a nanny because my mother-in-law, at that point, every year for 3 months, she goes to Haiti, and there was no one to watch the children. So God blessed us with this nice lady from the church. The church was right up the street. And the lady, she's still in our lives now. I love you, Delene. She's still in our lives now. The boys are going to be 12, and she was their babysitter. And, we're still close. She sees them, brings them gifts. They call her, try to talk Creole to her, but she was a godsend. So what would happen is, because my husband worked at night, we felt comfortable, because that means during the day he was home. So she would start, let's say 8 o'clock, right? She'd come, and then my husband was already home. He'd be asleep, but he's there. So at least somebody knows somebody's in the house. So she'd be there with the kids all day. I'd leave, get everything ready, go to work. And then I would have to get off of work, like, at least by 4:45, 5 o'clock, so that I could release her, because then I can get home by like 5:30. The latest I would get home is 6. And if it was looking like I'd be stuck at work, then I would just call her, because I wanted to be mindful and respectful, of her time. So I tried to be there in time for my husband to leave for work. So he would leave for work like 4:45, 4:30, so that if anything, in our brain, she was always only alone with the children, maybe 30 minutes, right? So that was a godsend to helping. So when I look back on it, it was a lot. But one of the things I told the therapist, trying to juggle everything, a mom or this or that, I felt like I was going to be judged if I didn't do it all. So that's why I didn't want to take help from people, and then on top of that, it wasn't my mom that was living with me. This is me and my brain. And I didn't want any issues. So it was great that we were able to talk to her, because he got to understand where my resistance came from accepting this help that he sees that's there, versus me wanting him to do it. And I had all these people here to, call on. And one of the things I did was, my mom is older, his mom is older. I didn't want, again, me feeling like a burden to be on them. So whenever I was there, I handled the kids. That's how I did it. When I tell you no sleep, up, laundry, whatever it is. Now they would do bottles and cook and do all that other stuff, but I had to take care of the kids. That's how I felt, because I felt like I didn't want them, their bones hurt, or they got arthritis, and oh my God, I'm taking care of these children, and now it means that I can't eat. Like this is everything that I said in my head. I wanted to do it because they were my children. Okay. I didn't want to feel like I was relying on anybody. So, um, and the same went for work when it was time to like leave, have to do the doctor's appointments. And because I had been at my job and my position a long time, I was able to get that flexibility to go, but the pressure was still there with all of the intense deadlines and work that we had to get done. So yes, I was able to leave to take them to the cardiologist. Yes, I was able to leave early to do this or come in late because they had that. But it was hard because I never got to just do that and stayed home. I was heading back to work. You know what I mean? So it was tough trying to juggle that. But again, my job and all my mentors and bosses were very, very understanding. But I also knew, me being hard on myself, I needed to not let anything slip and make sure I did what I needed to do because I didn't want any pushback or any negative situation associated with my work ethic, work performance, and deadlines. So I think I've covered everything, right? Life on the other side of infertility. I thank you so much for listening. Just to kind of recap some of the items that I talked about as it relates to what to be mindful of when it comes to life on the other side of infertility. The first thing I talked about was miscarriage and the possibility of that. Parenthood, what parenthood looks like after you've gone through infertility. Having a NICU stay if you have premature babies, what life was like that, after infertility. Breastfeeding, what that looks like, relationship dynamics, any hospital or loan bills, all of the finances associated with that as it relates to life on the other side of infertility, postpartum guilt, and juggling work and mom life with micro preemies and everything else that came along with that. So just always give yourself grace if you are a new mom after experiencing infertility, or if you are a person that knows of a mom that is new after dealing with infertility. Just kind of speak life into them, try to motivate them and let them know that they're not alone in this. They can do it, they will do it, and to reach out for support in case they need it. I can always be reached, www.mcdve.com. Again, my name is Marline DeRosso. I am your host of the Women Matter podcast. And today's episode focused on what life looks like on the other side of infertility. We're here to help you and support you on your journey, regardless of where you are on the journey and how that looks. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Women Matter podcast. Your support means the world to us. Remember to visit the website at www.mcdve.com for updates on upcoming events, sign up for our newsletter to stay connected, and explore how you can work with me for fertility coaching and other empowering services tailored for women. Together, let's continue this journey of empowerment and support. Until next time, be motivated, be courageous, be dynamic, and remember, woman, you matter.
Audio Jungle.